Okay, with both of our downloads complete, why don't we quickly take a look at the Visual Studio Code?
Now, since the main goal of the course is to master JavaScript, this is just going to be a general overview of the Visual Studio Code. Not an extensive video where we cover all of the possible features. And if there's going to be some specific setup feature that I want you to be aware of, I will cover it as we're progressing with the course.
First of all, this is going to be a welcoming screen. In your case, if you just installed the Visual Studio Code, you're probably not going to have recent projects. The only reason I have it is because, of course, I deleted it again, the same as with Chrome, and then download it together one more time together with you. Now I'm going to close this up. So I'm going to close the tab. And then on the left-hand side here, you can see that we have the icons. We have the Explorer. This is going to show us all the files we're going to be working on. This is going to allow us to search for files. This is going to be the source control, Git, and also debugging. Now I can tell you right away that most of the course we're going to work with Explorer. And then once in a while, we're going to look for the bottom one for the extensions. And essentially, extensions are just a way for us to add some additional features to our text editor. And then as you're progressing, let's say if you're going to be working with JavaScript, you're going to get some extensions for JavaScript. If you're going to be working with React, you would get some specific extensions for React. In our case, we're going to get a few of them. Now let me show you how the extensions would work. So these would be all the extensions you can search for, of course. Now, the fastest way to search for them is just going to be typing here. So let's say if I'm going to say JavaScript, and then you can see that we have tons of extensions available. And once I'm going to show you how we download the first one, then you're going to be able to see the extensions that you have in your text editor currently. Because, of course, at the moment, we don't have any. Like I said, most of the time we're going to work with our Explorer. And as far as Explorer, we have the sidebar. This is where we're going to see our files. So in this case, this is going to be, the folders we're going to use, the files we're going to use, and all that. And then here on the right-hand side, this is where we're going to be writing our code. So two places. On one place, we're going to have files. And then on the second one, we're going to have the code that we're going to be typing. So the web pages or projects we're going to be creating. And then all the way in the bottom, one more important thing that I would like to cover is the fact that for each and every editor, you can customize the settings. So essentially things like font size, things like what is the zoom level, and that sort of thing. And we have two ways how we can operate that. First, we have this option where essentially we have the GUI. And again, in this case, I'm going to zoom in. Notice we have, for example, font size. So at the moment, this is 12. And then we have, for example, tab size. Now, if you'd want to search for something, of course, the same thing. We can search here up on the top. But we also have another option, and that is working with a JSON object. Now, I'm going to change my font size just so you can see what we're going to have within JSON. So let me delete it. And then in this case, I'm going to say that font size is not going to be 12. It's going to be 22. We're going to save that. And by the way, this is saved automatically. But if we navigate to a JSON, notice right now I have editor font size. So this is what I'm seeing. And now, of course, this is going to be 22. Now, what I can do right now is I can change it back here to a 30. Why this is important? Because for some extensions, you're going to have to add some information within the JSON. So some extensions require for you to actually set it up your text editor in order for that extension to work.
So that's the general overview of the Visual Studio Code. And now let's install a few useful extensions. All right, and the first extension we're going to install is going to be Live Server, which essentially will allow us to see our results right away without refreshing the browser. So I'm going to set up my folder on desktop, but keep in mind you can set it up anywhere you want. And I'm going to give it a name of tutorial. Then I want to go to my Visual Studio Code and drag and drop. So that's one of the ways how we can set up the folder in Visual Studio Code. And then inside of it, right away, let's go with index and then HTML. Now, I also want to open up right away side-by-side browser, but this is a Mac thing. Keep that in mind. So this has nothing to do with Visual Studio Code or course specific setup. Simply want to set up side-by-side the Visual Studio Code and the browser. So that way, as I'm typing, I can right away showcase the results. Then in the index HTML, let's set up right away the general HTML document structure. And if you're wondering how I was able to do it right away, we'll cover that in a few videos when we talk about the Emmet. So just put that one on the ice. And once I have my HTML document in place, now let's navigate to extensions, and we're looking for search here. And let's type live and server. So let's type it over here. I'll zoom out and notice it has 18.4 million downloads, which means that it's a very useful extension. So let's go here, let's install, and the moment we do that, I'm going to navigate back to my index.html, and let's add a famous hello world. And now instead of opening this using the file system, here's what we can do. We can either right click, or all the way in the bottom we have over here, go live as well. And there's also a shortcut. So once we live click, notice we have this option, open with live server. So let's click on that one, and you'll see right away that we will have our document in the browser. And what's super nifty, that as I'm adding some content, it will right away display here on the right hand side. So if I'm going to say here, hello people, if I'll save, check it out, I'll right away have the result. And the same is going to work with a JavaScript. And if we take a look at our extensions right now, so let me remove the search text, you'll see that we have successfully installed live server. And as you can see, in the long run, this will really speed up our workflow, where we won't have to refresh the browser every time we add some changes. We'll simply save the file, and the latest result, whether that HTML, whether that is JavaScript, will be right away displayed in the browser. Now, one last thing that I want to mention, that yes, technically, you can autosave. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if we navigate to the File tab in the top left corner, notice we have this option of autosave. And what that means is that I don't even need to save the file. So let's say I'm going to go here with heading 3, and I'll just say hello. It will right away showcase without me saving the file. However, I'm not the biggest fan of such approach, especially as we progress more with JavaScript. It's my opinion that it's better to only run the live server when I actually save the file. Otherwise, you'll just get some weird bugs. And another nifty extension is Prettier, which nicely formats our code. So if I go back to my index.html, and if I just start messing up the code, you'll notice that once we save, we still get back the same result, but it's hard to navigate around our code. And the same is going to work if I'm going to start adding more headings. Let's say I'm going to add another hello. And you can make an argument, well, you can do it manually. And yeah, you can definitely do so, but wouldn't you agree that it would be nicer if someone else does that for us? And that someone else will be the Prettier package. So let's navigate to the extensions again. We're going to use search, and we're looking for Prettier. This one again, 18.4 downloads. Let's install this one. But for this one, we'll also have to configure our settings. So first, let's navigate to the settings. So we're looking for a cog, then settings. Now again, let me zoom in, and we're looking for format. And first, we want to click on format on paste. So every time we'll paste the code, it will format, and also format on save. And then we want to look for default and formatter. And we want to set this equal to the Prettier. So find the Prettier option over here and just click on it. And also in the extension docs, they suggest adding these lines of code to the settings JSON. Now, once we set Prettier to be default, we actually already added this one, and you'll see that in a second. So essentially, we just need to worry about this line of code. Now, in my case, I'm going to grab both of them and just overwrite whatever I have over there. So we want to go back to the settings, and if we're looking for settings JSON, it's going to be over here, this icon. So let's click it, and then notice we have the font size, that is 30, and we have format on paste, format on save, and like I said, we already have this one over here. So let me just overwrite that, copy and paste, And now let's save it. And you know what? I'm actually going to change this one back to 26. And now if we navigate to index.html and if we save, notice how we right away nicely format our code. And the same is going to work with the JavaScript. And the last thing that I want to mention in this video, typically while I'm recording, I keep my zoom level around 175 because that way you can see better the result that I have in my browser. So don't be surprised if here and there your final result might look tiny bit different. Again, it's because I have high zoom level just so you can clearly see what result I have in my browser.
Cool. Once we've got extensions and general setup out of the way, next, let's quickly cover what is Emmet and why it is so useful. So, of course, throughout the course, we'll type out JavaScript. That's our main goal. However, we'll also need some HTML and CSS. And what's really cool about Emmet, it allows us to speed up the workflow. Now, we'll just skim the surface because as we're going to be progressing with the course, the moment I'll use some kind of Emmet snippet, of course, I'll pause and cover in a larger detail of what is happening. Now, the good news is if you are using Visual Studio Code, you don't have to do anything in order to get the Emmet snippet. And if you remember in the previous video, we had a small taste of Emmet, where essentially if I wanted to have a boilerplate, the only thing I needed to do was to set up exclamation point, and then I right away get my HTML skeleton. That's it. That's all I had to do. And that is the general idea of Emmet, where instead of typing out, for example, heading 1, and then saying, I don't know, hello world, I can simply say that I would want to go with a H. So that gives me all the elements that start with H. And then if I would want to go with heading 1, then I just type heading 1, and that's it. And I right away get a heading 1. And if you are interested in more examples of Emmet, just navigate to Emmet.io, then look for the documentation option. And then in here, you can find the syntax, how you can get element types, how you can have implicit tag names, and all that good stuff. Now, if you're not using Visual Studio Code, I would highly suggest getting an extension for your text editor so you can also use Emmet. And just to give you a few more examples, if I would want to have a div, I don't even need to type out div over here. I could if I wanted to, but I can just skip that. If I'm going to have a div, I can just place a dot here. That is going to give me div with a class. For example, I could say special. Now I also can combine. I can say that this is going to be a div with a ID of first. And notice I right away get my div, and I can place here whatever I would want. Now I also have an option of getting a dummy text. So for example, if I go with paragraph, and then if within a paragraph I would want some dummy text, I can just type lorem, and then this is going to give me some standard text. But if I would want to control how much I'm getting, whether that's 5 words or 10 words, I just need to add a number. Notice here, it gives me right away abbreviation of how much text I'm going to get. Now, if you lose this suggestion, for example, if I'm going to press space and I would want to go back and get that suggestion, just go back and press Control and spacebar and check it out. You'll right away get back the suggestion. Again, we're just skimming the surface in this video of what is Emmet and why it is useful. As we'll be progressing with the course, each and every time I'll use one of these snippets. Of course, like I said, I'll pause and I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. This just shows you where I'm getting that ability. And if you're using Visual Studio Code, you also have it right out of the box without installing anything or setting any kind of configuration.